So I'll tell you one more time, next Sunday we're having baptism. If that's something that is interesting to you or you would like to talk about, we need to do that soon. But we will be doing that next Sunday morning. So if that is something that you feel like you need to follow up on, please let me know. So we've been taking this journey to the cross and really to the empty tomb on Easter. And Jay did a great job last week talking about the arrest. He arrested Jesus really well. And so today we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the trials, or at least one of the trials. So let me explain, let me do a little background for you. When they arrested Jesus, they took him to the house of Annas. Now, Annas was, according to the Romans, the former high priest. You see, the Romans had a law that somebody couldn't be high priest more than an extended period of time. The Jewish people, however, still recognized Annas as the high priest. And so when Jesus was arrested, if you read John's gospel, that's where he was taken first. Jesus answered a question, and they didn't like the way he answered it, so they hit him in the mouth. And so by the time he came to Caiaphas, which was the second trial, which we're about to talk about, he was probably already bleeding. And so there was a series in a very short period of time of 6 trials, 3 of them in front of the religious leaders and 3 in front of the civil leaders. 2 in front of Pilate, 1 in front of Herod. And so each of the gospel writers selects a different part of that story to share. And this one is in front of Caiaphas, the acting high priest, the one known by the Romans as the high priest. He's the one that has authority according to the Romans. But everybody in Jerusalem knows it's really Annas who's in charge. Right? So they get to Caiaphas, they have gathered around, they have brought Jesus before them, and now it's starting to be more official because more people are there. And just let me say, as we talk about the trial, and if you read about the trials, you will see the ones that happened in the religious setting were illegal, according to Jewish law, but they happened anyway. So we're going to read about one of those. So we are in the book of Matthew, chapter 26, starting with verse 57. And so again, this is happening in front of Caiaphas, the recognized high priest by the Romans, and he is overseeing this trial. Matthew 26, verse 57, page 997, if you're using the Pew Bible. Matthew 26, 57. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." "You have said so," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look now, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" Now, I want to go through several things in this, and a couple are extremely, well, actually, they all are pretty important to us. And I want to point them out. And the first one is one that we really need to hear in our culture and society. It's one that we need to grab hold of, we need to remember, and it's this: the easiest truth to find is the one you're looking for. The easiest truth to find is the one you're looking for. So look with me at verses 59 and 60. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. but they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say they were looking for truth. It doesn't say they were looking for facts. They were looking for false testimony. They were looking for false facts. They were looking for their understanding of truth. Because what they really wanted was Jesus dead. They wanted him to die. And they were going to do whatever they had to find whatever evidence to make this trial legitimate so that he would be put to death. And so they had people come and they gave false testimony and they made up all kinds of things about him. And as we'll see, finally two agreed on something that really wasn't even true. But none of it mattered because the goal wasn't truth. The goal was to kill this man, to see him dead. And they were searching for the truth they were most interested in. And isn't that really how our society is functioning right now? We don't look for truth. We look for our understanding of truth. We try to find the people who agree with us and see things the way we see them. And that's who we listen to. That's who we read. That's who we interact with. We talk to those people that see things the way we see them, even though they give us half the story. We look for our understanding of truth, and that's what we support. A few weeks ago, Ladine and I were shopping, and as often happens, she will be shopping in something I'm not real interested in, and so I'll tell her I'm going to a different part of the store, and I'll come back to get you, right? So I did that. I went away, and this woman came up to me and started talking to me. And so we had a quick conversation. I was cordial, and then she asked me for my phone number. It's not that funny. So anyway, I did. I refused and went and told my wife the story. So, a couple of things that you may be thinking. The first one may be, is she visually impaired? Right? The second, some were probably thinking, why would a woman go to a man with a wedding ring on and ask him for his phone number? What kind of woman would do that, especially to a pastor? Now, in fairness, I don't wear a t-shirt that says I'm a pastor. They don't know that, okay? Or you may respond the way my wife did. You're not telling me the whole story. She wouldn't have said that 20 years ago, but she said, I said, you're right. She was trying to sell me a water softener. Now, here's the deal. Nothing I said to you was untrue. A woman I didn't know came up and talked to me. We had a conversation. She asked for my phone number. I refused. And I decided to have a little fun with that, right? But I told you the part of the story I wanted you to know because that was the piece of truth I wanted to give you. It wasn't something that I made up. It really did happen. But I just didn't tell you all the facts. See, that's what the Sanhedrin was doing. They weren't looking for the facts. They were looking for something to support their understanding of truth. Let's be honest. The news sources that you read or that you watch are the ones that see things the way you see them. Let's just be honest. Or if people talk about political people, those in office, you listen or you talk to those people who see them the same way you see them. Or if it's your sports team, you like to read people or listen to people who see your sports team the same way you see them. And none of it's about truth. It's about our understanding of truth. I'm reading a book called The Church Called Tove by a man named Scott McKnight and his daughter. I didn't know what the book was about. I just like Scott McKnight, so I figured I would get it. But it's a book about all of the things that are happening in churches all across the country where those in positions of power are taking advantage of women in their congregations. And I was like, well, I wasn't expecting this, but it's fascinating because every one of them has the same playbook. First of all, they deny. Then they attack the person who is accusing, and then they come back and they say, we have to defend the congregation because this is God's work. and they control the narrative. And they help people see their version of the truth. And it's just phenomenal to read the names of the people that are involved in this, and it's like, you've got to be kidding me. And so we have to be very careful to see the whole truth. You want to do something fun sometime? Next time a major news event happens, go to CNN.com and read about it. Then go to foxnews.com and read about it. And you will find two completely different sets of facts. Both may be true, but they're only giving you the ones they want you to give. They want you to have. And so it's this crazy thing. We want to make you believe what we believe. And that's exactly what the religious leaders were doing. We got to find something against this guy. And even if it's not true, we have to find something against this guy because he has got to go. Because that was the goal. It wasn't about truth. Well, the second thing, and this one is probably just as hard for us. All right, you ready for this? Sometimes the absolute best defender of truth is silence. Sometimes the absolute best defender of truth is silence. So we read on, finally two came forward, verse 61, and declared, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, destroy this temple, talking about his body, I will rebuild it in 3 days. Right? But they took it, they twisted it just a little bit, and they both agreed that he said it. Now, let me tell you why that matters. If you read Deuteronomy 19 in Jewish law, you cannot convict someone based on the testimony of one person. There has to be 2 or 3 people agree. So they found 2 people that agreed, and so Jesus was mocking the temple, which is the house of God, which is where God lived. And so now we're on to something here. Maybe we have something going on, even though it's not true. Verse 62, then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent. He didn't say a word. Now, I think about that, and I think when you think about Jesus of Nazareth, you are thinking about the smartest human being who's ever lived, who's ever walked on the planet. And I'm sure that on the human side of him, he had a bullet point list of things he could say to these guys. In fact, knowing Jesus, he probably had a question that he could ask that would end the whole thing. Because that's usually what he did when he talked to these religious leaders. He would ask them a question they can't answer, and it'd be over. And so I'm sure in his mind he had the question, this is the question I can ask in return and end this whole thing. But instead he stood silent. Now there's a couple of reasons why this is going on. One, it helps fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah 53. But Jesus was also fulfilling what he taught. He was living what he taught his followers to do. The one in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, if someone smacks you on one cheek, turn to them the other is also. He was living that out. But he was also living out the teaching, don't throw pearls before swine. You know what that means? That means don't talk to people about the truth who are not going to listen to you because you are wasting your breath and your time. And he said, there's really no reason to respond because they're not going to change. I could end it. I could say the right thing. I could fix it. I could make it go away because I know exactly what to say, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stand in silence. And we don't know how long the silence lasted before the high priest stood up again, but here's what I want to tell you. That silence was deafening. He was letting them know, you've got nothing. And you're having to make stuff up and you know it. And the whole tenor of the situation was changing, and they knew it. You see, sometimes we have been convinced of this thing that if we don't say something, then we just are agreeing with what's being said. See, that's not true. Because sometimes if we're just quiet, the silence is deafening. I've seen it work many, many times. Sometimes we just need to be quiet. I remember when I first started teaching at the college, first couple of semesters, when students would ask questions that I didn't know, it just really it just tore me up. I got to have an answer. I'm the professor. I'm supposed to know what's going on. Well, 10 years in, I realized, oh, that was silly. Because now you just say, I don't know. But it's worth a Google, and all of a sudden you see all the phones trying to find the answer. See, the problem is, I think we sometimes think we have to know all the answers. We think we have to stand up for the truth as we understand it. And the truth is, sometimes just being quiet is the absolute best thing you can do. I mean, not always, and I get that, but most of the time, just be quiet. You don't have to have the answer. You really don't. And Jesus, the smartest man who ever lived, stood in silence. Well, the high priest couldn't take it. He's like, this is getting nowhere. And this silence confirmed that for him. So, he goes on. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. The question affirmed they didn't have anything. The question affirmed they didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what truth they could find in their understanding to kill him. So he just says, all right, here's the question. You answer this. Jesus could have remained silent again. Said nothing. And by law, they would have had to let him go. For verse 64, you have said so, Jesus replied. And Jesus said this, but I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. What Jesus did there is he proclaimed his divinity. They heard at that moment exactly what they heard the truth. Jesus told the truth and they didn't like it. But Jesus could have stood on the temple with a megaphone and said, I am God in flesh, and not been any more offensive to the religious leaders. Because in their minds, that's exactly what he said, and it was what he said. And it's exactly what he meant. Oh, a good Jew can't accept that to be truth. So Jesus says, I come from God, and I am God. Wasn't the only time he said it. I mean, he said it regularly, but there was never one more clear than this one. So I want to chase a rabbit for just a minute here. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, which really it was a book based on some radio broadcasts he did in World War II. World War II, the British government came to C.S. Lewis and said, would you go on the radio every day and teach us about Christianity and what it is? Imagine a government doing that. And so he did. But one of the things that he talked about was Jesus, and regularly, but he said, Jesus cannot be just a good man. He cannot be just a prophet. Because he made multiple claims that he was God. And so he has this classic understanding, this classic teaching from those radio broadcasts and Mere Christianity, where he said, really, you have to come to one of three conclusions. Either Jesus was a liar, he was a lunatic, or he's Lord. He said maybe he wasn't God and he knew it, but he just wanted to say it, and he was just lying to everybody. Or maybe he thought he was God, but really wasn't. He was just crazy. Or maybe he's who he says he is. Amen. Liar, lunatic, Lord. And I think as we look at the story of Jesus and we look at the realities of what he said, that's really the bottom line. The tomb is empty. Why is it empty? Liar, lunatic, or Lord? Fascinating read. Encourage you to check it out. But here's what I want us to see about Jesus on this day. Jesus knew they had nothing. He remains silent. By law, they have to let him go. But Jesus never lost sight of the mission. What was the mission? The mission was to come and do for humanity what humanity could never do for itself. To create a way for humans to be right with God. To bridge the gap between God and humanity so that human beings could have an eternal relationship with God Almighty. That was the mission. And he came in those moments, and I'm sure the human side of him had answers that were absolutely perfect to end this thing. But instead, he never forgot the mission. And so, and this is my paraphrase, inside he was going, I've got to help these knuckleheads do this. They can't pull it off. I've got to give them something so that they can kill me. Now think about that. I have to say something so they'll kill me. I have to give them what they need so they will put me on a cross and finish this deal. They are incompetent and they can't pull it off unless I do it for them. So I'm going to give them the one thing that they will call heresy and they will put me to death for saying. And here it is. I'm God. I'm God. And I think about that, and I think about how you and I were more important than the justice that Jesus deserved. And I process the whole thing, and I come back to this incredible truth that you and I really matter to God. Hello. You and I really matter to God. We're a big deal. We're such a big deal that Jesus said, okay, I'm going to help them put me on the cross. Already bleeding from being hit. Knowing what's ahead physically. Knowing, we talked about a couple weeks ago, that the Father would turn his back on the Son, and Jesus would say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Knowing that all of that's ahead, he looked and said, this is the mission. This is why I came. To model how you should live, but then to die for you. And as we go through the story, you keep seeing these points where Jesus could say no and change his mind. But then you keep seeing at those points and in those moments in history, Jesus says, yes, I will finish the mission. I will finish what I've been sent here to do. And he did. So the response was not surprising. The high priest tore his clothes in verse 65 and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look now, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? Everybody in the room is now a witness. He is worthy of death, they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fist. Others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, Messiah, who hit you? And so it begins. Because Jesus didn't lose sight of the mission. He didn't lose sight of us. I pray that as we continue through this Easter story, that truth will resonate with you over and over again. He kept saying yes. He kept saying yes. He kept saying yes. Because we matter that much to God. Let's pray.